All right, YouTube. Khogali has been exposed as being honest again, saying what she really thinks about we white people. She's one of the main proponents of BLM, sort of Black Lives Matter, but she is not necessarily the most restrained individual. On sort of the BLM far left side, you've got people who, sometimes make sense, but then you've got a much larger number of people that are there, it appears, to attention whore, or to rabble rouse. They're like Antifa or whatever. And they're all loosely aligned with one another. These movements are sort of separate, but also they overlap. They're interconnected at this point. They're all part of the same sort of weird extremist core that's going on. The one whose mere existence, by the way, is spawning an increasingly traditionalistic and almost fascistic Generation Z, which is, it's funny to watch that. It's actually quite funny. No, I really mean that. But let's take a look at what this woman's saying. It appears she did not study genetics to any great degree. You've got sort of the we were kings thing going on here, where pseudoscience and false history is masquerading as actual reality. This is common in BLM as it is with other groups. But we'll take a look at what she's saying. This is what's her fellow, Yusra Khogali. I can't remember which one this is, whether this is the kill all white people one or the Muslim supremacy one. I think the Muslim supremacy BLM leader is the one that always wears like the veil and stuff and wants Sharia law, and once talked about another woman's like reproductive organs and like, oh, she shouldn't be allowed to have a vagina or something like that. She's even more crazy. This isn't even the craziest person who's associated with BLM, so keep that in mind. Toronto, I'm going to read from the link in the description. A co-founder of Black Lives Matter Toronto argued that white people are recessive genetic defects and purportedly mused about how the race should be wiped out, according to a post on what appears to be her Facebook page. Now, normally when I see that, I say, well, maybe it's just a fake page set up to rabble rouse even further. But it's actually true. This was actually posted by this person. There are people who actually believe this. Now, can you imagine, and when people were commenting on this, of course, they pointed this out, if this had been a white person saying, oh, blacks are inferior, they should be wiped out, they'd be getting a visit right now, let's face it, no matter where in the world they happen to be, especially if they were in North America or Europe. But she, of course, she's free to say this stuff. It's dick-wagging, honestly, because BLM is not actually going to wipe out the white population. It wouldn't have the means. Although she says, oh, look at us, we have the numbers. Yeah, okay. Yeah. She was, she was the one. This is even funnier. She called Justin Trudeau a white supremacist. Now, Justin Trudeau, if you know anything about him, of course, he's very far left, except on pot for some reason. I don't exactly understand that. He is sort of the hobbit-looking dude who runs Canada right now, and his claim to fame is that he had a more worthy ancestor. Other than that, he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, he dicked around when that wildfire was destroying city after city and did very little. Spurned U.S. spurned support from his allies and took support instead from, like, South Africa. And then all the firemen that South Africa had sent, they all, like, abandoned ship and went back, which was, it was interesting to watch. I guess they're not used to the sort of old growth you get in parts of Canada, and how quickly it blazes up if you're in the middle of a prolonged drought, I suppose. She's talking about recessive genetic defects. This shows a general lack of knowledge of what recessive and dominant actually mean in the genetic sense. When you say dominant, it's talking about genetic expression. It's not talking about dominant as in superior. This is also, I've seen certain people who are white actually use this misnomer. Actually, this logical fallacy that the term dominant in this sense has something to do with superiority as opposed to how genes are expressed, of course. If you have two alleles, if they're both dominant, the dominant trait shows through. Generally, there are exceptions. There's some weird interactions that go on. If you have a dominant trait and the recessive trait, and you have one dominant allele and then the recessive allele, the dominant trait shows through, although sometimes they're blended in one way or another. As far as skin color goes, though, skin color is not based on one gene. It's not based on one expression of skin tone or racial characteristics. It's much more complicated than that. It's much, much more complex. You're talking about a large number of genes that actually have to do with melanin production, certain physical characteristics that you would generally consider associated with one racial phenotype or another. It appears that she's did not exactly major in biology or something along those lines. And there was a time in the past when a lot of the social activists within any given era were intellectual individuals, and that's why some of those social progressive movements actually took hold. They were people who were intelligent. They may have been, you can consider them wrong, but they weren't illiterate. They weren't dumbasses. They were academically trained. They had sharp wits and so forth. This is not that era. Let's face it, the people who are leading these BLM groups or Antifa or whatever they happen to be typically could not even get into a community college course. They are functionally illiterate most of the time. They're hardly intellectual. They read one book and they think that that makes them a genius, usually the Communist Manifesto or something like that. It's much like the extreme evangelical regressives. They read the Bible and they think that that means that they're a genius, think that that means that they're capable of governing, capable of undertaking the redrawing of social order, that they're capable of weighing in on literally anything. And the hallmark of someone who's intelligent versus a moron, it can become difficult. A moron can masquerade as an intelligent individual because they are extremely opinionated. They don't realize that they're actually a moron. So what you've got here is a moron who's weighing in on genetics, which she clearly knows nothing about, on social order, that she clearly knows nothing about, and on politics, that she clearly knows nothing about. And then posting about committing genocide on her Facebook page. What a wonderful move. I'm sure that you won't get investigated for this. I'm sure that nobody will pressure the police to at least consider investigating your comments. Even in Canada, which is further left, at least at the moment, than the United States, and which has been for a while, which is socially progressive, as in they have no problem with displacement level migratory movements and so forth. Even in Canada, people are going to get fucking tired of this sort of rhetoric. It's to the point they're getting tired of Antifa, too. I saw a video the other day, and it was a little dated. I think it was from late January, so it's not completely recent, of people in, I believe, Portland or Seattle, one of these West Coast cities. They were actually harassing the Antifa members, trying to get them out of the way and yelling at them and swearing at them and so forth, sort of issuing vague threats. Now, of course, if somebody's blocking the road, committing a criminal act and doing so, swearing at them is perfectly acceptable until you start throwing punches unperturbed. Unfortunately, in most parts of the country, it's still illegal to preemptively defend your community by getting those rabble-rousers off to the side of the street. It's unfortunately not legal yet. It should be, but it's not. But these movements are led by idiots. They're led by people who, they might understand something about how to perturb others. Their training, usually, is in getting negative attention for themselves in hopes of getting a couple people to think that they're a genius or something. Karl Marx was the same way. Just an armchair anthropologist, no actual training in anything he was talking about. His premise was entirely wrong. Why would we expect anything different from BLM? You've got the evolution of a movement that originally pre-BLM was we're tired of violence in our communities, and rightfully so. Many of these activists aimed part of that blame at black leaders who have done nothing about inner city crime, and at the left too, because of its fixation on thinking that gun control and continuing the gun war will actually be helpful. BLM, though, is now completely devolved into little more than a rabble-rousing political movement that has more in common with the worst aspects of maybe Louis Farrakhan rhetoric than it could ever possibly have with, the togetherness of MLK or even social activism a la Malcolm X or something like that. BLM today is essentially a communist movement. Some of its members don't even, I guess, realize this fact. But then you have people like this who clearly don't understand the world. If you think that Justin Trudeau is a white supremacist, you are way, way out in left field. And if you think that recessive versus dominant genetic traits have something to do with racial superiority, you are way, way out there and you have no idea what you're talking about. But then again, I don't expect anything more in the form of intellectual conversation from people who are part of this movement at this point. Most of them, I would say the majority of people that are still aligned with this movement, are dumbasses. They're either dumbasses because they believe it, or they're dumbasses for sticking with it despite knowing better. And they shouldn't be, if you know better, you shouldn't be involved with such a movement. You should make your own movement something that's got a little bit of sanity and hasn't been infiltrated by a bunch of rabble-rousing opportunists like Al Sharpton and people like that who pretend they talk a big talk about the woes of the black community and racial discrimination and all of these things, and then they go back to their mansions. They get your donations when they run some sort of campaign. They take some kickbacks, and then they have a good laugh at you. You know, whether you're black or white doesn't make any difference to them. They're rich. You know, which one was it? Was it, I keep forgetting whether it was Sharpton or Jackson that cheated on their taxes over and over, and Obama just looked the other way. It'd be funny to see him get nailed to the wall under Trump, honestly. Be really funny. But yeah, there's a reason why the upcoming generation of people that are barely approaching young adulthood now seem to be far, far more politically incorrect and way, way more, at least fiscally conservative and more prone to perhaps nationalistic views. There's a reason for that. There's a reason that they're way, way to the right of the millennial generation, or certainly Gen X. It's because they've been raised up having to look at this crap every day. They see their politicians as being PC fuckwads. And so naturally they're going to rebel, and that youth rebellion is going to bring about nothing more than basically paleoconservatism, essentially, with all of its offshoots. Libertarianism will rise, nationalism will rise, populism and nativism will be in full swing probably on both ends. So that's what you've created. So you can thank Obama for that. If you're far left, you can thank Obama when the next couple of presidents are even more populistic than Donald Trump, because it's a good possibility that that will happen. As the younger generation swings far right, the millennials begin waking up and swinging far right on the power of the fact that we're all a bunch of internet activists. It's going to be great to watch. It's going to put the left into chaos. You're going to dwindle off into a non-existent minority at some point. Then the pendulum will eventually swing back. Hopefully the next time you have some common sense. Become classical liberals again. Become Dixiecrats or something. Somebody who's capable of making an utterance that is sensible one time or another, even if it's rare and sporadic. As far as this goes, though, this person obviously doesn't know what she's talking about. Nor do any of these other people. You know, get Madonna out there. Oh, yeah, I want to blow up the White House. Wonderful thing to say. Gets a visit from the Secret Service. Oh, did you mean it? No, not really. Backs down like a coward and pisses her panties. She's even capable of pissing without a catheter at this point. I think she's approaching old age herself. You know, it's not like Cyndi Lauper stood for gay rights, actually remained a social activist of some merit, and was just saying, oh yeah, people should get along, you know, people shouldn't be discriminated against. Then you have Madonna come out and do her autistic screeching and just completely sets her apart. It's like, no wonder your career's in the shitter. When's the last time you produced a song anybody heard on the radio? Not that that's relevant either, that's dying too. So you're up shit creek without a paddle. You know, move to Sirius or something. Do a far left talk show on there, see how long you last. That's about all. Peace out.